this is the monkey brain continuum right here, where flow state is full monkey brain. At the end of the day, you're not really thinking about what you're doing or what's going on. You're like tunnel vision. Like when I have a lifter who's got like 500 pounds in their back or 520, I'm like, probably not going to feel great, dude. Squat it. Just sit down and stand up. Versus when they're doing their like warm up sets, let's maybe like lean, like you press into your toes a little bit more, let your body pitch forward a little bit more. Let's get on those knees a little bit more.
God. So you took 600 on a week 4 on your squat this block?
Yeah, yeah. And typically anything above 5 reds is kind of what would be like absolute end of block goal. Usually I can hit that once and then I'm totally cooked beyond that. But looking at it versus like the 584 previous block week 4 versus like the 563 the previous, it's like it's stacking very neatly. Everything is lining up very neatly. It's all moving at the same relative speed. If there's any changes to technique, it's not obvious at this point in time. It's very consistent across the board, even though we've essentially added 20 kilos to it.
Yeah. I mean, you've always been that lifter or as far as I'm aware, and anyways, like you thrive on momentum. Like it's a steady thing. Like if week 1 is good, let's do week 2 like that. If week 2 and so on. Like the messy blocks there's less chaos maybe in your training scheme or training notes.
Yeah. And I mean, like obviously having consistent training days, consistent nutrition, sleep, whatever makes it easy. But I'm also somebody who has like a very high rate of imprinting, which is something I've talked a bit about with Sean before, where if like my secondary deadlift, if I start doing something wacky, it will immediately show up on my primary deadlift, or if like a back down on the primary, it'll go into the secondary and vice versa. Like if my technique starts to slip a little bit, it will very much immediately show up the next session.
Yeah. 2 of the strongest female benchers I have we can get away with it a little in the off season, but like with Zoe and with Emily, both of them are like, I don't want to do close grip a month out from comp. Like, don't, please no. And they're both fairly wide grip benchers, and it's the same thing. Like my groove feels so off. I feel like I'm trying to do too many things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I feel like that might be an easy segue into it. I mean, we were going to talk a lot about technique on the lifts today, and knowing that it can change with different intensities, how much variability is okay, how much should you even worry about it? Because I feel like there's this whole non-alarmism camp almost. What is it? Movement optimism, I think, is like the fancy word for it these days. Where like you can round your back and it doesn't matter, and there's like no additional context provided.
Yeah, it's like self-organization is king, and it's like you have that one dude who's trying to conventional deadlift with 1,000,000 pounds. He's got all that blue tape all over his body, screaming. It's not that simple. It's not like.
Yeah, and I think if you're just trying to lift, and you're not chasing performance, and maximizing your leverages on something, whatever. It's maybe not whatever, but it's less.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, it's as simple as that, right? If you're not, the thing I tell a lot of people is like, if you're not trying to squat, bench, and deadlift as much weight as possible, you probably don't need to in the first place, because at the end of the day, there will be a point where your technique does matter with those. You can get really strong on them up to a point, but you will want to eventually look at refining that, and that's where coaching comes into play, and that's where we can really, number one, address an issue that's been like nagging your shoulder for the past 6 months. But also creates an opportunity to like suddenly get much stronger as well.
Yeah. I've seen it with recovery, actually, a surprising amount. Like there's the performance side of things where it's like it's in front of you, but there's one lifter I have that comes to mind where we can deadlift at a certain frequency if we deadlift one way, and if we let her go into like how she can lift absolutely the most weight, it's like 5 extra days of recovery, and her squats for the rest of the week are fucked.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, there are times when you need to address technique because you need to, for that reason, number one, promote better recovery. Like I know that for my bench, the way that I hold the bar plays into that a little bit. Like I'll get really nasty elbow tendinopathy if I'm not like super relaxed with my hand, but I also don't feel really good with like 400 plus pounds on my chest when my grip is super relaxed, but I do need to be mindful of like, hey, there's a tipping point in the block where we can start to do that a little bit more, as opposed to like trying to be absolute about it. and like trying to be neurotic and basically like pigeonholing myself like, oh, if I just keep my grip relaxed the whole time, my elbow will never hurt. It's like I also probably won't bench above 400 pounds that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is that balance of performance. But I see it go the other way a lot as well, where lifters will like, or maybe not the other way, but there's like another avenue off of that where, especially with self-coached intermediates, I'm gonna lay into it a little here.
I could name them.
Yeah, we can name names. We don't have to. We'll just provide Instagram profiles and addresses. But they'll like make all this progress by making their technique better, right? Which you should do, right? They kind of move towards the generally accepted principles with absolutely, yeah, center mass management, not ripping your spine in half where your L5 moves 6 inches before the bar comes off the floor.
Yeah.
You know, your elbows more or less in line with your wrists when you're benching ish, right? You know, bar over your base of support ish, right? And they've added like, you know, they've seen it where they can squat 20 pounds more, 30 pounds more, bench 30 pounds more even just by like cleaning it up, right? But not understanding that there's an upper limit to that. Like you can only skim the cream off the top until there's no more cream to skim off the top.
It's very much that principle of like raising the floor in order to raise the ceiling. You know, like you will make that progress up into a point, but then you will be hard capped again unless you spend the time building up that base, slowly inching the floor up in order to have the ceiling rise at a more rapid rate, and eventually getting there. But every now and then, you just have to have a fuck around, find out kind of situation, you know, because likewise, lifters will make that progress. They will add that 20 pounds to their squat and then be like, oh, I need to squat like this forever, or follow this exact like programming structure, this exact microcycle forever. I've been doing it for 3 years, but it's like you have to get to a point where like you do kind of have to send it a little bit. You do have to kind of test the water and understand that like while you may be maintaining really good center mass management and things like that, I know above 95, my hips shoot back a little bit on my squat. I know that like my knees won't come as far forward. I have one lifter who will sink the bar super deep with like 95% of his max, but 96% it's like almost a butterfly touch. And as long as he still gets that press, like does it really matter? Like
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, ultimately like I don't see the judges of the competitions as long as you're within the spec of like touch your chest, wait for the command, hit depth. You know, you past that, you put the weight up, and congratulations, you've succeeded in your lift. Like, I don't get 5 pounds of consolation like total points for making it look nice.
Yeah, and it's easy to fall into the pitfall too of like trying to make it look nice and thinking that like, oh, if I'm super upright with my sumo deadlift, I'm going to be maximizing my leverages and blah blah blah. It's like number one, like, do you even have the hip IR to do that? Like, probably not. Most people don't, but they try to force it, and then they end up getting injured. Their hips hurt. They feel super impinged. They feel super locked up because they're trying to like have this beautiful technique that maybe you can do with 265, maybe you can do with 375. The second you have like 485 on the bar, it goes to shit. And it's understanding to like, hey, the things that we idealize about technique and these little things that we try and like. You know, I'm big on primers with a lot of my athletes. I'll have them do a pause squat versus a regular squat or like a tempo bench before a regular bench to try and yield some kind of thing out of the top set. But you don't want to equate that pause set or that tempo set with the top set as well. You have to understand that there is going to be still some variability. That's why you have it in there in the first place. You know? So not getting stuck in your head either and being like, I'm absolutely going to move every single rep the exact same way is kind of going to defeat the purpose of everything you're trying to do with it. Because you're not going to have an RP 11 grinder that looks gorgeous. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I'd almost want to go a bit deeper on that thought with, I feel that the intent should be there, but the understanding that your input and the output's what's going to change because like you said, you're going to self-organize at a certain capacity, but if you're way off the mark to begin with, where like you don't even know how you're supposed to be lifting it, your self-organization is a wild card. As opposed to you're going to self-organize into something more efficient that'll let you kind of get this short-term gain that might not be how you do most of your training.
Yeah, and I think that whenever we're teaching technique, this is also the tipping point with like self-organization versus like actual technical cueing. And I think this is where a lot of lifters miss the mark because you'll see that dude who's like they'll post like every single warm up to like a new 1 rep max attempt that they miss, or like a it's supposed to be a 3 rep max, they get 2 reps and they die, and they'll have like 135 on the bar, and they're trying to like absolutely toss it as hard as possible, as fast as possible. And okay, there are a few lifters who can like do that and do that at a very high percentage of their max. But in my opinion, it's like it's not doing anything for you. Like I'll take 1 red, 2 reds, 3 reds on my deadlift at this point, and I've been tempoing them to the knee and just like being very intentional with how I move that. And then when I get to 485, I'm like, okay, I've been feeling really good. I know I'm managing my center of mass. I don't feel like I'm getting pulled forward. My wedge feels really good. Now I'm not thinking about tempoing it to my knee. It's a little bit like faster off the floor. It's a little bit faster to my knee as a result of that. And I get to my top set, like, let's say 250, 260, whatever it is. Then all those things that I did early on, where I was very intentional with those very light weights, because you can make the bar move however you want, that's when they'll start to show up. And it's like, yeah, maybe my center of mass will shift a little bit backwards into my heels a little bit faster as opposed to like doing it at the knee where I want it to. But I'm able to get the bar off the floor a little bit more. I'm able to wedge a little closer. I'm able to get my hips closer in because I spent the time trying to establish what my body needs to do by telling it what I want it to do, and then kind of letting it do what it needs to do when the weight gets to that point.
Yeah.
Establish that flow state early and then turn off the brain when you get to like second last warm up.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, your IQ is going to dip into the double digits when you have a X percentage in your hands or on your back, anyways, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like if
Yeah.
you're not like if you have any thought in your head besides like the fear of death at a certain point, it's like you're probably not doing this correctly anyways.
Yeah, yeah. It's and I for the mechanical side of things, that movement variability is important and how to put it. So like you're effectively talking about running in essence variations in your warm ups where you're doing tempo work, you're doing positional work, where a lot of programs might just put that as a secondary. It's like do your main lift, how you're gonna do your main lift on every set, and then do your secondary work or your back down work with your pause at the bottom or your focus on the wedge. It's like, all right, cool. Well, at a certain point, you have to do your main movement like that too. So why don't you prime it that way? Um, and this is what I feel like gets misunderstood when a lot of raw lifters get into. We'll use my favorite extreme example, like conjugate, and they see people doing like all kinds of stuff, and there's a reason to shit on that style of training, which is people started doing random stuff a long time ago because they didn't understand that like effectively like your program is going to work independently of like 10 reps for the day on that, and all you're doing is just teaching yourself to self-organize in different ways by learning new leverages, learning new positions, training from different angles. And in the same way as what you're talking about with your warm-ups, those guys, at least the people who do it successfully raw, like I can't speak to equip because I've never really competed with that, but I venture to think the thinking is the same. They're just getting that variability and finding, okay, well, what's the weak point? What falls apart in my squat? And then what's something that's going to challenge that? And if you pitch forward on a squat, do something that forces you with a little bit of a stronger effect than just a conscious effort
Yeah.
to do that if you need it. But also, if you don't have to make it more complicated and you can just think about it in your warm ups and go with something
Yeah.
less intrusive, is way less time cost.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as that goes, like it's something I've personally started to lean back into. Like there was a period of time where I was very heavy on periodizing everybody. And then the past, I want to say 2 years, year and a half, 2 years, I was very much like find the golden microcycle, stick with it as much as possible because like as a lifter myself, like that's what gets me stronger. But even in the past like 6 months, it's very much swayed back over to the side of like, oh no, we're just gonna do different things. Number one, okay, builder lifts are important at different stages of the game. If we're 6 months out from a competition and we need to just, like you said, like get used to maintaining your position on the squat, like maybe we should do some like SSB stuff. Maybe we should do some stuff that's gonna force you to fight with your shoulders as opposed to just standing straight up with your legs. But aside from that, just enjoyability too. When we think about like lifter burnout, we think about lifters feeling like they're not progressing. I hate to say it, but sometimes the low hanging fruit is just making them do a different movement and making them go for like, we're going to look for like a 5 rep SSB high bar PR. And for some people, that's what keeps them motivated. And over time, that's what leads to more progression, anyways.
Yeah, and there's a delicate balance between like chasing low hanging fruit all the time and
Yeah,
having the tree grow. I guess if we stick with
yeah,
the botany
yeah,
analogy, right? But like, if what keeps you progressing in those blocks that work well, that you've like validated the fact that pushing triples on your comp squat makes your comp squat stronger, great. But like, if the limiting factor is you just getting burnt out on doing triples on your squat, from a mental standpoint, like doing other stuff and hitting a safety bar 5 rep PR or whatever, if that is just literally mentally enough to take you out of the staleness that you get from the thing that works really damn well, it keeps you in the game for longer, and so you can hit more 3 rep PRs on your low bar squat over an undefined sum of time or duration of time. And then there you go. Like, your potential in the sport has gone further and you're able to lift more. And you can attack those blocks with more intensity.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I was talking about this actually a lot with Chad actually earlier today. And he basically raised this idea that, like, okay, well, you're going to have blocks where you experiment with different things, right? But there's always this like narrative in your head of like, what if it doesn't work as well as the thing that I know works, right? And I feel like that stifles a lot of people, and it holds them in. It's a complicated thing to explain, but like, it holds them in the spot where they're like, I know this works. I don't want to go outside of this zone because like I've validated that this works. And good, right? But the missing part with that logic, like the fallacy that you're creating, is that that's going to keep working. And the second thing is that once it stops working, it's not like it's burned and it's gone forever. More than often, it's that like you've just gone stale on the strategy, and you need to desensitize. Or sorry, you need to resensitize a bit to it because your body has adapted to that specific stimulus, right? And so when you have these exploratory blocks, one of my favorite things mentally in terms of the reframe is not like getting away a little bit from the progression fatigue that you can get with lifters who are like, I need to bring my squat up 2% this block because every other block has been 2% or more.
yeah,
And more getting them into this idea of like, hey, we're going to have blocks that we know work very well, and we're going to drive progression, and like, let's hit it, like let's be aggressively performance minded. And then let's have these other blocks where we try a couple of other things. If it works amazingly, we find this whole new style that we can train with that you progress really well with, and awesome, we literally have twice as many options for getting you dumb strong now. Worst
yeah.
case scenario, like,
And lifter
it literally just
psychology,
resensitizes you.
yeah, and lifter psychology matters a whole lot with that. Like, I'm very much of the mindset that like, regardless of who you are, right? Having a block of like all close grip bench is gonna feel weird at first. You're gonna feel like you're not progressing. You're gonna feel like you're not doing anything. But like long term, big picture, like it is just another thing to add to your toolbox when like we hit a plateau. Like now, problem solving skills have to matter. Like I can't just keep burning the circle or running the wheel until it falls off. Um, and that's where a lot of people get stuck in that like endless intermediate phase where it's like their problem solving skills and their ability to deviate from what has worked is either non-existent or they're deviating completely where they're like, oh, I'm going to go from like, my pinky is on the ring to like max grip bench. It's like, that's probably not what you need, dude. Even if you have a block where you're like, your comp day is your pinky and you're doing like one day that's wide grip, it's like, you probably still need an adjustment period in between there where like maybe it's the ring finger, maybe it's the middle finger, but over time you got to titrate things. And that carries into the technique discussion as well because it's like if you rapidly change your like your grip on bench, or maybe you go from like a high bar squat to a mid bar squat, or even to low bar, or super ER sumo to like frog stance sumo. There's going to be an adjustment period with it. You're going to have to get used to it. It's going to expose other potential weaknesses that should guide your decision making process when it comes to like writing your program. Of like, hey, now that I'm doing this like frog stance sumo, my hips shoot up super fast. It's like, okay, well, maybe we need to make you better at hinging. Maybe we need to do some like stiff leg deadlifts on a back down, or even as a secondary day movement to get you used to like having your hips at a higher position. Maybe we need to push the quad accessory work a little bit more to just be able to leverage that and really push into the floor a little bit more. But I have a lifter who I recently gave her high bar squat. It was like off season thing in exactly the scenario you were describing where I'm like, hey, we're just going to try this. You know, like right now your squat is moving really well. We did tempo for a while because we needed to correct some bracing stuff and some like, in and out of the hole type stuff. And it worked. And we've not been able to do any direct quad work because they were like going to different gyms and stuff. So I'd rather push high bar this block, just try something new. And they crashed out. They were like, what are we doing? And mind you, whenever I have a big change to any program, I always communicate it to the lifters very clearly. I usually send most people like a block overview video unless we have a one-on-one call where we talk about it, where I'm like, hey, this is what we're doing and this is why. And it was there. It was in the video. I'm like, hey, we're going to try this because we need to just have some more direct quad work. We're doing like leg extensions and low bar squat. We're just going to try something new. We have historical data to support like, hey, it will help your squat after a block or two. But just got so caught up in the like, well, I can only high bar 155 and I can low bar 185 for the same number of reps at the same intensity. I'm like, that's okay. Like that's okay.
Maybe there's a reason for that as well.
Yeah, you're doing a stripper squat when we have 280, 290 on the bar when it's your 1 rep max. We probably need to work on your quads a little bit more, and we have a limited availability to do that. So we need to find this workaround. And you need to just get used to the bar being on your neck again. It sucks. Ask anybody I feel like once you get into low bar, you don't go back. But once you do, it feels awkward at first. And then you start hitting a 4-rep PR on your low bar or on your high bar, and then you start hitting a 3-rep PR. And then sometimes I'll have lifters do like a primary or a secondary high bar single. It's like a pseudo primary day, and it ends up almost always carrying over into their primary day super strong because they get a lot of that direct axial loading, so they feel really good underneath the bar when they go to do their actual low bar squat, and then their quads are forced to just do a lot of the work, so they end up feeling like they have a lot of pop on their primary squat, and it's like, you just had to stick with me for the past 6 weeks. We had to get there.
Do you find that there's any validity to the idea, of course, keeping outliers out of this, like triple reverse banded double chain squat with one heeled shoe and a flat, like let's not get ridiculous, but like if you have somebody where they're low bar squatting over 200 and they're high bar squatting under 150, for example, is that like I've noticed with a decent amount of reliability, like that's a good signal that we should probably work on developing the high bar squat if there's that much of a gap when you'd expect it to be 10-15% off and you're like 30% off. Like, hey, we should probably really work on this because we're going to get some outsized returns.
Yeah. If for no other reason than it just puts your body in different positions and will strengthen different areas. Like, okay, like, again, I'm the poster child for the golden microcycle. I think the only blocks where we have not added weight to my squat were blocks where I was injured. And that's 1-rep maxes, not just 3-rep maxes, but like 1-rep maxes. I've hit PRs almost every block the past 3 years. That being said, having those different blocks, having those different movements where there is a big enough gap, I do think has a lot of potential value. And I think the potential is where the issue lies, right? Because it's not always a one-to-one substitution, depending on the workload, depending on the leverage, depending on like how good they are, how efficient they are in one movement versus another. But like a low bar squat to a high bar squat, unless you're somebody with super long femurs, super short tibias, and you have to like hinge a shit ton on your low bar, you're probably going to get a decent amount out of your high bar, assuming it's like relatively a similar pattern. Going to be a little bit different, but if it's just close enough, it will be there. And even with some movements that are further removed, like I always have my sumo deadlifters pull conventional at some point in their off season because it makes them better deadlifters. Not because I want them to like get hype about their conventional, because I'm like, that's really not the main focus. But if we do like a fatigued single and they hit like a conventional PR and they get hype and like mentally get that reward from it, that's great. Because now when we decide to come back to this in 6 months, we can say, hey, it worked for this reason. You hit this PR last time. Your sumo deadlift has now gone up 50 pounds, so let's go back in and let's add another 20 pounds to your conventional and see what that does.
Yeah, and just like repeat the experiment. Like you validated the idea. How repeatable? Like how many times can you press that button? Are we both thinking of the same high bar squatter right now, or low bar squatter with high bar position? I feel like we are.
I don't know. I don't think I am actually. I'm not thinking of anyone in particular. I
I'm
think I
just
know
thinking
who
about his
you're
high bar
thinking of now
squat.
that you say that, but
Yeah,
yeah.
the whole time you were giving that example, it's like if he does any more high bar squats, I feel like we know how they look at this point.
You won't be able
Anyways,
to watch.
no,
You just won't.
no. Um, okay, yeah. So I mean, like on the mechanical side of things, super important, right? Builder lifts work for a variety of reasons. There's a ton of irrelevant details we can get into. You touched on the mental side of things there as well, with lifters being hyped, like, hey, yeah, conventional went up this much, carried over to my pull, and like they start to get a little more insight on like, hey, that's actually how the training process works. Like I don't have to just do that one thing that worked all the time perfectly, and like variability has merit even with lifters who respond very well to high specificity.
Yep.
I feel like with bringing it back to technique, though, there's some lifters where you'll watch their technique and there's a very significant change that'll happen in their technique because it almost looks like they're avoiding something. They're either like aware of a certain technical fault, or commonly I'll see it with lifters when they're either shoulder injuries on bench and they'll overtuck really hard because they're like, oh, flaring your elbows is bad, or on deadlifts and they hyperextend their back because they're like, I can't round my spine, it's gonna blow me out. They'll like pull 135 however, and then they'll get to 250 and it's fine. They touch 3 plates and it's like you watch their whole wedge and their whole wedge changes and they're like putting their legs in place and extending their spine and then wondering why their back is rounding when they pull.
Yeah. So I think there's ways to address it from a coaching standpoint where, I know that when I had bad back issues a couple months ago, I was terrified to deadlift. Just truthfully, like I did not want to deadlift. Like 200 keys was enough to put me in like 7 out of 10 back pain. And the thing that ended up working from like a more meta perspective was actually just like making my warm up jumps smaller. And especially when you get to a certain strength level, regardless of what that is, you are going to have these jumps that you're accustomed to. The average person who can deadlift 485 pounds, 4 reds, is probably doing some like 1, 2, 3 reds. So 155, 265, 375, probably going like 440 and then 485. It's a very standard kind of scheme. And it kind of skews out beyond that. But then you take somebody who's deadlifting 600 pounds, maybe they're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 250, 270, which is 600 pounds. Bring that 200 back in, reintroducing that 200 just to slow how quickly the weight is increasing within a session, and reminding them, hey, like as you're warming up, I want you to focus on XYZ things. Like let's really make sure that you're wedging properly, starting with that high hip height, getting into your quads, really pushing through the floor. If you go from 375 to 485 and you're hesitating, you're not going to do any of that. But 375 to 440 suddenly seems like a much more manageable jump. And then 440 to 485, okay, well now we could do it with 70 pounds. We can definitely do it with 40 pounds. Reframing the warm-ups I find is super helpful with that. And that kind of loops back to the earlier comments about like, priming sets within a primary day by itself. But especially for lifters who are like post-injury, explaining like, yeah, that you're not as strong as you were when you were feeling super healthy. So let's just adjust your warm-ups accordingly so that we can build what we got.
Yeah, mentally, I feel like just being able to relate it, like going in with the intent of relating, okay, this is how the last set felt. The next set is a small departure from that. It can breed a little bit more consistency. And we've talked a lot about movement variability earlier, but like not having some rash decision based around fear built into the warm-ups, you're like, okay, cool, like it's a 10% change in weight. Like if I was fine to pull 80%, I'm probably fine to pull 88% as well. Like if my body didn't fall apart at 80%, there's really nothing wrong with 88%.
Yeah.
Right now, 50 to 70, that's a pretty big jump, and mechanically there can definitely be some thresholds if you're coming back from injury. But I feel like really once you're over 80%,
it's not going to change much.
No, like your tissues are fine, really, and it's going to boil down more to like if did you mess it up, as opposed to like was it something out of your control.
Yeah, and I think that's like a good conversation point for like the actively injured lifter versus like the recently recovered lifter, right? Because if you're somebody who's like actively injured, you've got something, maybe it went from like 10 out of 10 pain, now it's 7 out of 10 pain, and we're doing this movement that we know is probably going to cause like two or three that we know is going to be irritating. Um, that is a lifter where I would say, let's take these smaller jumps. Let's just trust it. Like, it's probably not going to feel great. As long as the pain threshold doesn't exceed this number, we're okay. We move on from there. Maybe we don't add more weight, but we have these kind of dynamic ranges where we're like, go up to this weight unless, pain is high, then you reduce it. Always being very clear with like what the cap should be versus the lifter who is recently injured, right? And we've used that injury time to maybe address some technical things that contributed to the injury in the first place. And now they're feeling good, but maybe they're hesitating because they're back to maybe taking these larger jumps, or they're like, it's a block afterwards, and they're like feeling pretty good, but now they're going to touch a weight that they haven't touched in like 3 or 4 months. That lifter, I'm gaslighting. I'm totally gaslighting. I'm like, dude, like you threw 375, you pulled 440 last block. Like, what the fuck is 485 at that point? You've deadlifted 600 pounds. Like, just do what you did last block. You be a okay. And like 95% of the time, that's good enough.
Yeah, I play a little bit of a different game. Like I'll generally game them as long as they can tolerate reps. I'll find some rep number where they can like artificially inflate their max, and presumably like I've got some data from before they got injured, and I'll be like, yeah, look, your 10 rep max shows you're like 80 pounds ahead of what I'm asking you to take for a single. So just go do it for a single because this is nowhere near what your projected max is, and like that's a safe decision to make. Like we're far enough off where if I know they're just in their head, I'm gonna be like, look, here's some data. Here's literally a number that's gonna show you why this is really not maximal, and like just how much safety net we can assume you have. And there you go. And I guess same sort of idea. We're gassing them up a little here, and being like, yeah, like come on, man, you got this. Don't think so hard about it. Like do it right, move on.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like at a technical level, I feel like just about every lifter is gonna land on the same idea of being able to just know, okay, like this is where the tension is, and go and lift the weights. And it's like some people will call it a flow state where they're just like there's a rhythm to the lift for them.
Yeah.
Other people will just be like for myself, you ask me what happened, I'm like, I don't know, I can generally hear noises, and like the disturbance in the force is how I sense the squat command at a meet.
Yeah.
But like I don't know what anybody's face looked like, and I don't know what the words are. I just know something happened. There was a sound.
Yeah.
And other than that, like I just know where the tension is in the lift. But like it's so individual. Do you have any? It's hard to describe. Like it's very much a feeling.
Yeah.
But how do you navigate that?
Yeah. And this is the monkey brain continuum right here, where flow state is full monkey brain. At the end of the day, you're not really thinking about what you're doing or what's going on. You're like tunnel vision. Like when I have a lifter who's got like 500 pounds in their back or 520, I'm like, probably not going to feel great, dude. Just squat it. Just sit down and stand up. Versus when they're doing their like warm up sets, I'm like, let's maybe like lean, like you press into your toes a little bit more, let your body pitch forward a little bit more. Let's get on those knees a little bit more. And then like, again, like increasingly decreasing that cueing, decreasing the amount of like external stuff that we're providing with them, because I want them to feel. I hate the idea of being like locked in, as somebody who's a very like. I think there's lifters who get like hyper fixated on being locked in, and then they get like that adrenaline dump. Versus like other lifters who are like kind of always locked in, but they don't seem it because they're not super hyped during the lift, maybe, or they're like just very consistent with the way they conduct themselves.
Yeah.
Versus like they see the weight on the bar and they freak the fuck out. So I like my lifters just to be in that like state where they're not really thinking about it by the time they get there. Again, that's why I personally use a lot of primers within single sessions. But I will also tell my lifters to like ugly load the bar as much as possible. Like when I did 280 myself very recently on squat for a PR, I was like, never touched this before. I'm like, it's probably going to be fine. But we're like loading it up, and I squat with a dude named Costa, who's like a 700-pound squatter, like really good, strong squatter. And the way I loaded it was like 3 reds, a blue, a red, and a green. And it's like, it would never look like that in a competition setting. It looks like more than that, though. because there's more colors, there's more external stimulus. So when it counts, when I'm actually there doing it in real life, I'm not worried about it anymore because I've done things that look like more than that. And I can just kind of trust in my body, hey, like we've taught it to do the thing. This is probably less than what we've done before. So we can just do the thing and not worry about it.
Every lifter ever that trains with pound plates and then goes to a meet.
Yeah.
Is
It's
the
a secret
greatest.
sauce.
It's the absolute secret sauce. Yeah. It's, that I had a coach a while ago, and I remember it was like my first, well, I want to say it was my first 315 squats. This is a long time ago. This is like probably 2010 or something. And he's like, Jedi mind tricks. Like, any plate milestones, if it's your first time taking it, like, I don't want to see perfectly symmetrical 45s here. It's, like you said, with the reds and the blues and stuff, like, there should be weird diameter dimension shifts through this, like, no steady taper. Make it look super weird and kind of unrecognizable. Where if you walked into the gym and you saw that, you'd have to like count it consciously. You wouldn't just be like, oh, that's 275 or that's 315, where you like know the bar weight. And it's just one less thing to think about. Where it's like that's so external. You need to be focused so internally that it's just a distraction, and addressing it as that.
Yeah, and I do the exact same thing where um, week 5 of my training cycles, we generally hit like all these like volume PRs on bench. It's just the way that it tends to go. It's like sets of 6, sets of 4 with like a 2 count pause, 3 count, whatever. I'll literally put in like the athlete notes to my coach Sean. I'm like, it's 365. Just trust me, bro. And if you look it back on video, you can't discern what it is because I've got like the silvers are between the whites, which are between like a red and a green. Like, and I'm just kind of loading it as I go. Most of the stuff is ascending, so it's just easier to put more stuff on the outside. But I think from a psychological perspective, for a lot of lifters, it works because sometimes you're like walking up to a squat, you're walking up to a deadlift, and I always think of like Taylor Atwood or like Gavin Aiden at Sheffield, back and forth like a shark on squat. They're eyeing up that bar. Well, guess what? If we're used to seeing it this wide and now it's this wide, you're probably feeling better about it automatically, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah. With that plate loading you described with the silver in the middle, I think you just literally funded somebody's therapist's salary for a year.
It's Sean's. It's Sean's.
Yeah. Oh my god. All right. Let's wrap this up. I feel like we covered a lot of ground, we went in a lot of different directions. If you were gonna, somebody said, hey, you know what? How much do I need to really care about technique? What's your like 2 sentence answer? I won't pigeonhole you into one.
Okay. How much do you need to care about the technique? If it's the start of the block, a lot. If it's the end of the block, fuck it.
All right. Sweet. As usual, I'll leave any relevant links and articles and stuff in the show notes. Thanks a lot, Zach.
Peace.